say in 15 minutes, it's going to be kind of more of an overview with some practical examples, not any sort of text heavy information, more examples that I can give through my dealings with teams over the years. So just a couple of bits we want to look at, how to apply that across the different age groups, some examples, how you would go about designing it, whether it be in your session, over the course of a season, or even within your week, how that might look. Some considerations to bear in mind when you're planning it, and to factor in. Obviously, some benefits of it, just kind of outlining maybe one or two things that you weren't aware of, how both are so similar in a lot of ways across speed and agility, and then also just looking at maybe where you can get some more information yourselves after this to take away and find some more drills. I know myself coming away, you always like to come away with something new to bring back to a session, so hopefully I'll be able to give you that before we finish. So just looking at speed then, and look, really it's getting from point A to B as quick as you can, and it's everyone wants it. Everyone wants to be quicker in camogie or any of our GAA field sports. So how can we go about trying to improve it? Those involved with kids, I suppose, hopefully I'm giving you a bit of reassurance here in that we're not looking for you to, I'm certainly not looking here that you're going to go away and be going back and doing really technical drills, giving loads of coaching points to the kids. No, what I really want is for you to be able to go away and like what you're doing, because you have to, whether it be 6s or 8s or 12-year-olds, you have to kind of use your imagination and get them on side and make it fun, obviously, is number one. So some of the things I'm talking about here, whether it be games such as using the imagination of cat and mouse, crocodile water, which is quite an important and a good one for the younger ages. For example, getting from point A to B in as few steps as possible. There's crocodiles in the water. How many steps can we get from point A to B? That might be 10 meters. And they might count their steps. They got there in 7 steps. Can we get back there in 6.5 steps? Something so simple. There's crocodiles in the water. Can we get there? And ultimately what we're working on is nearly stride length. Unbeknownst to them, and you haven't gone near the word mentioned stride length. They're just doing what you're asking them to, and they're enjoying it. They're having fun as they go. Again, same with cat and mouse. That might be a chaser on their tail, whether it be lying on the ground and up and taking off over 10 or 20 meter sprints, and they're being chased. And ultimately, with that competition and that bit of fun, you're working on speed, and again, they're having a breeze. For what you're really working on, but you're getting the benefits from it. Any sort of maybe different things that you mightn't have used before, the likes of bubbles, blowing bubbles, where they're chasing down bubbles and getting to clap it and burst the bubble is just something to stimulate them and a target for them to get there as quick as they can. Races, obviously, whether that be relay races or where you might have a winner, or you might create different scenarios through the uses of ladders or hurdles, all have a place there in trying to improve coordination and ultimately improve movement efficiency. For example, they're driving up knees, jumping over small hurdles, all relative to improving speed. And again, they're just having fun hopping over an obstacle that's new to them that they don't often see. So quite easily there, you're working on some of the real key components of speed in a really fun and stimulated environment that they're getting something from. I suppose as we go to more towards the older ages, what we might look at, and again, where we can, is really kind of put a focus on looking at some of their mechanics, and again, really simple form. And we'll talk about how that's going to work with a group shortly. And the group of camogie girls you're working with, they're not sprinters. So you're going to have a limited time with them. But some really easy wins are the likes of high knees, heel flicks that they're regularly doing, A skips, which is a simple version of skipping, something to take note of and kind of maybe YouTube after if you want, and also wall drills. So when I refer to wall drills can be done leaning against the fence, or some sort of side on the side of the pitch, whereby they're focusing on driving their knee, getting really tall, and holding these positions before switching over. So A-skips, wall drills are two you'll find really easily on YouTube after this if you want to take note of. The accelerations we're talking about and in speed, and again, working on 100-meter sprints, you know, doesn't really, you won't get that opportunity a whole lot in working in these field-based sports with the number of times you're training during the week and what you have at your disposal. So quite often the game, whether it be a cornerback or a midfielder, it might be a 5 or a 30-meter dash, and whereby you have to get to that ball as fast as you can, or you're chasing a marker. So really those are the big areas for me that I'm often working on speed and over those short distances. How can we maximize those first few steps and getting out ahead of the marker to get to the ball? So a lot of my stuff around speed and where it comes in the session will generally focus on these kind of 5 to 30-meter distances with different types of start positions. Flying 30s are again maybe another drill to take note of, and this could be a flying 20, for example, but a flying 30 would generally be where you might build up over 30 meters. By the time you get to 30 meters, you're at full sprint, and you're trying to maintain that from 30 to 60, and there's a 30-meter ease off then from 60 to 90. So it's a flying build up to 30, maintain it from 30 to 60, and then an ease off from 60 to 90. And we'll talk about rest and recovery just in a second. Wicket runs have become really popular in terms of movement efficiency. Again, at these older ages, there's some really good articles online. So again, wicket runs might refer to, I often use just the large cones, the dome cones, but they can be hurdles that are left down on their side. They could be any sort of space objects that players are running in a straight line through, and they can't touch the cones. So they have to focus on their stride length and getting their knees up over the cones. And again, it's unbeknownst to them for the first couple of efforts. It's funny, but then when they get into their stride, you're getting really good mechanics because of the spaces of the cones. They might often range from 1.2 meters per cone to 1.8 meters. But wicket runs are another way of training speed and working on more max velocity, working on really building up the speeds over 30, 40, 50 meters. Just some ones for you to note as we're going. So how do you factor it into the sessions then? So when you're looking to train agility and speed, the real time to work them within a session is when they're kind of fresh. Okay, so once the players are well warmed up, you're talking, I generally incorporate it after the 15-minute mark, between 15 and 30 minutes. That's when the players are well warmed up. If it's a cold night, you're giving it maybe a bit more time. Coming into 20-25 minutes, that section of the session whereby they haven't been taxed hugely in the initial part, they're well warmed up, but they're fresh. Where there's a reduction risk of injury, but you're looking to really train that speed or the agility component as you go. So again, if you can aim for that target, it shouldn't be done at the back end of a session. So for example, training speed at the end of a session is not the way to go about it. When the players are fatigued, you're not really going to get the benefit of any speed stimulus, really. You're just kind of more working on endurance and the pace. If they've done a train for an hour and you're putting in some sprints at the end, they're in a fatigue state. So you're not getting the benefit of speed at that section. If you want to train speed, have it, like I say, when the players are fresh in the first third of the session. In a week then, so I suppose depending on your time of the season, if it's game after game and the game is on a Sunday, you're training maybe Tuesday evening. Tuesday evening is not a bad time to factor in speed, but I suppose again it comes down to you as a coach having a conversation with the players and seeing how are they feeling. If the players are coming to, it's been a really tough game at the weekend and they're still a bit tired, training speed on that Tuesday night then probably isn't the key focus. Most of the drills you're doing is done with obviously a level of intensity, but if you're looking to really train it and they're in for fatigued, you're not getting the benefit of it. So maybe you might hold off until the Thursday, Friday, where they're nice and fresh and you can get the most benefit from that session. In the season then, so obviously early on in the season, I would spend a lot of time working on the mechanics end of it when the players come back in pre-season. So again, the likes of those simple drills of high knees, skipping, falling starts would be another one I would use quite often. I have those nearly in every warm-up. So when the players have warmed up, they've gone through maybe a low intensity skills drill, and we've done some dynamic stretching. I'll quite often put in some of the mechanic movements over 0 to 20 meters for the players to work on, and just reinforcing the key messages as you're going throughout the time. We talk about maybe some of the cues you can use to help them a little bit later. But as we move through the season then, and coming up to obviously the more important games, coming into championship, and the ground is hardening up a bit, once it's not in the COVID season, you will get a real, I suppose, benefit from it coming into those championship weeks, whereby the players are mad for a road and they want to get the most from it. You've got hopefully brighter evenings and harder pitches, and you can really get the benefit of training speed. And you really want to, I suppose, you want to get the players sharp. We all know that, yeah, the level of sharpness comes into focus at that time around the big games. So as the season progresses, the emphasis moves more into speed and agility. Early season, it's really about, I suppose, obviously building the fitness levels and working on some of these mechanical things, if you want to call it that, with the older group as we're going throughout the season. They're camogie players, they're not sprinters. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches, in myself even, get bogged down in. Are we doing enough? Should I be doing 100-meter sprints like we see on the TV? And the answer to that is no. They're camogie players that are playing a 60-minute game. You have to consider that you're training the girls maybe twice a week with a match the weekends. You have them for an hour and 15 minutes. Can you give the absolute most to train in speed as what a sprinter would do? And the answer to that is no. So if that's maybe some of your concerns, don't worry if you're not getting those big distances, because the recovery time for a lot of this real sprint work, if you're to follow a textbook and train as a sprinter, you would be given almost a minute recovery for every 10 meters you covered. So for example, you cover a 60 meter sprint, that's allowing for 6 minutes of recovery time per effort. There's not a coach in the country or a team in the country that's going to give you that time to train absolute speed, or pure speed, you might call it. So a lot of the speed we're working on nearly is speed endurance, whereby there's a short turnaround time before the next effort. And quite often for me in my groups, I might have put them in groups of 6 to groups of 10, allowing for a little bit of recovery. So by the time I get through it, through the drill, 6 people or 10 people might have gone before I go again. So the bigger the groups, the longer rest period. But certainly I wouldn't be encouraging, like I say, if players can do it on their own time and they're eager to work on speed of 60-meter sprints or 100-meter sprints on their own, on their nights off, maybe that's the place for it. But you're certainly not going to get that opportunity in your sessions. If you're trying, for example, if you're working on 100-meter efforts or 60-meter efforts within your session, generally you're working fitness, and it's more anaerobic fitness, we'd call it, than speed. So just to bear that in mind with the recovery times. If you can work in groups of 6 to 10 per line, that would be sufficient recovery, with a walk back recovery between these efforts. Again, the players, they're not used to running 60-meter sprints at a go or 100-meter sprint at a go, so they're not going to be durable to it. If you try and bring that in too quick and clock up those sort of volumes and intensities, you're probably running the risk of someone picking up injuries along the way. So it will be a real gradual progression as you're going through the ages and through the distances of what you're looking to do. And like I say, quite often from early season with me, it's moving from 10, 20, 30-meter sprints. I might go in my season up to maybe 50-meter efforts, and that only maybe might be 5 or 6 efforts within a session. And like I say, if we can get our bang for buck in terms of the quality of 0 to 30 meters and getting maximal efforts throughout, I think there's a lot more to be gained than worrying too much about distances beyond 50, 60 meters. Just to bear that in mind. The progressions, I kind of gone through those and what we're talking about over the shorter distances. The coach and I suppose, you know, people talk about measuring speed and clocking it. Again, and again, every so often, no harm in doing it. If you have access to speed gates, great in the off season, wonderful. But generally, standing back and observing what the players are doing and how they're doing them, is enough to know, am I getting a maximal effort from, you know, your players? Are you getting a maximal effort from them in their efforts? And quite often, whether it be kids or adults, once you bring in some competition, no matter what it is. 2 weeks ago, before we finished with Longford, we were doing some relay races where they handed over a cone to each other, and the crack they had of guys 30 years of age would have been the very same as kids that were 10. So if you can bring in that stimulus and that bit of competition, it will really that really gives you maximal effort. It's grand doing a drill, but when you start calling a winner, or when you have there's some sort of forfeit for the losers. We had it whereby the boys had to sing a verse of a song, the losing group at a relay, and the crack we knocked out of it was unreal. So they're the simple little wins you can get to really drive home the maximal effort you're looking for when you're coaching some of these speed drills. Obviously, the opportunity to get to maximal speed is probably, it's not that often. But when it does happen, it could be again the final moment, whether it be a track back or a breakthrough for a score. So it does need to be trained. But like I said, the distances I would generally work it would be for speed would be maximal at 60 meters. And when we are doing it, with an easy recovery walk back, but your time where you'll get the benefits, I think you're always looking at your group going, right, what are our key areas that we need to work on, and they will generally take most of your time. The ability to train speed is generally built into my sessions at maybe a 10-minute period, and they can include both the ball and without. Really, I suppose if we want to work speed in its truest form over those distances we're talking about, they do need to be done without the ball to really get the benefit of it. But again, that would depend on the age group too. The younger kids, I would generally keep the ball in all the time, or some form of object, whether it be a baton or a cone handover. But as we get through the ages, it allows you to maybe develop, or I suppose give a specific time frame to working on speed within your sessions during the week. The risk to injury, and again, it's probably something more so for the older players, is a lot of research will say that if we can give the players an exposure to high speed running, to sprint distance running during the week, at least once during the week, well, then we're keeping our hamstrings quite healthy, and we're reducing the risk of injury. So and you know, that quite often that might come in a game situation. If you're playing games each week, well, that's where the players will get their exposure to max speed. But if, for example, our drills were all really confined areas and the players weren't getting to really open the legs to get in some sprints, again, any sort of pitch, any sort of conditioned game, whether it be 10v10 or 15-on-15 in the bigger areas, you're allowing room for the players to build up speed. And giving them that opportunity in at least one session a week will go a long way to reducing the risk of injury for these players. So there's a lot of research being done on the benefits of it in reducing the risk of hamstring injuries in particular. Okay, so with the agility then, so what we're looking at with the agility is two different forms, what we might call change of direction, that Stu touched on, and also agility. Controlled and reactionary. Okay, so you'll see in the top drill in the top right corner, that drill is basically starting at point A, running up to point B, side shuffling to point C, side shuffling all the way across to point D, back to point B, and reversing back to point A. So that player knows before the drill commences what they have to do. They have to run forward, to run side to side, and to reverse. The drill below is a mirror's game where I have my yellow box, you have your red box, and you copy my movements in your box, what I do. So if I go to the top right cone, you'll come to the top left, as the diagram shows. So that's what we're talking about, reactionary. The place for both of them in all the sessions and at all age groups. With the adults, with the teams I'm working with, I'll always have an element of controlled. So they'll always have, but when we start working on agility, I'll never go straight into reactionary, whereby it's a reaction to a player's movement, or it's a call, whether it be left or right. I'll always give them and the brain an opportunity to work on, they know the movement, so they know where they have to go, and then we'll progress on to reactionary drills. And like I said, that can be done at all age groups, whether it be under 8s or 10s, all the way up to adults. And I'd encourage, I suppose, an element of both in your sessions. And like I said, that's very much about just giving them the call, telling them where you want them to run to on the whistle, and they know. Then changing it up, whereby you're bringing in a bit of competition, and they're reacting to a call or a whistle or a movement of a player they're marking. Some of the games we're talking about there, again, will be the MERS game. We'd often do with the senior guys the opposite of MERS. We'd call it magnets, whereby they do the opposite in the grid to what I'm doing in my grid, and that creates a bit of fun too, whereby they have to think and react to the movements I make, and creates more challenges. At the younger ages, again, you're putting maybe minefield games in tight areas, whereby there's maybe cones on the floor and they're trying to dodge the cones as maybe they're being chased, and they're working on change of direction and movement, again, unbeknownst to them. Dodgeball, and again, the blowing, this time we're dodging the bubbles. If you've got coaches in the center of a square and they're blowing bubbles and the players are trying to dodge them, again, you're creating all the movements of changing direction, shuffling, they're pushing off left and right, they're slowing down, and we should talk about in a second all the different levels of agility without them even realizing. The deceleration, before we just go on, I suppose, is, like I've mentioned there, putting the brakes on. And if you don't put the brakes on, well, then it's a car crash. So if we can work on players, whether that be coming up to a tackle, or whether it be having to change direction, if we're training that, not many people will think about training how to slow down. The control drill I have in the top right corner does give an element of that, whereby you're attacking point B, but you have to slow down before side shuffling to point C and D. So the ability to slow down and change direction is really important. And again, in terms of reducing the risk of injuries to knees and ankles and hips, it's a really good thing to factor in. I quite often do reaction or do control drills for deceleration, whereby I might have them sprint for 10 meters. I might have a cone at that 10-meter point, and half a meter beyond, I'll have a line of cones going perpendicular, and I'm calling that the cliff. Don't slow down until you pass the 10-meter point, but don't fall off the cliff at 10.5 meters. And just as an example, and that competition of, again, who's falling over the cliff, girls, stay within it, but don't slow down too early. A real simple way of training how to slow yourself down. Just conscious of time, about 6 minutes left, I think. Niall, have we time extra for questions? How am I going? Are you with me?
We have a few questions in, so
okay. And we're wrapping this up at 25 past, am I right? Or
yeah, that's it. The time, I think you were very eager there. You started ahead of time.
Oh. So we're going to half, am I right?
Yeah, well, it's on 4. It's in 5 minutes there now, so I presume it's going to stop then, I'd imagine. So
okay, grand. I'm gonna come through a couple of these, and I'm eager to get the questions.
Yeah.
But we're almost there. Agility will follow a similar pattern within the session, whereby it's at early in the session when they're fresh. So try and get that in at the 15-20 minute mark, and a similar across the season as you're becoming more towards the championship games. I suppose the ability to get the players sharp and up to championship pace and change the direction will come more into focus. So we'll follow a very similar team to our speed. The small-sided games, a lot of research being done on the area for small-sided games and how to best work agility. So some of the papers that I've seen have spoken about, for example, a 20 by 40 meter square maybe 5v5 or 4v4, whereby you're having a load of change of direction in those small areas. And the smaller the area, obviously, the more change of direction you're going to have. That might be a 1v1 tackling square or a 2v2. The bigger the pitch, the more opportunity for straight line running, and which would be more, I suppose, effective for working on speed. So just to bear that in mind, the shorter the pitch and the smaller the area, the more agility can be worked. And it can be very much brought into condition games alongside drills. There's a lot of similarities between them. Both the fun element and the competition element has a place in it all. There's always an element for not having the ball involved. So, like I say, I'd encourage it, obviously, the ball to be in play at the younger ages. But as you come up through the teenage years, there's definitely a place for working on its truest form of speed without the ball to really maximize the benefit of it. Bear in mind the conditions with weather, this sort of weather now with heavy bogged pitches, training speed and agility will become quite difficult, and you're probably going to lose out on the real benefit of training it. Best served, I say, on better pitches and slightly harder ground. Again, just some key summary points before we finish up. Train when fresh. Remember they're camogie players, not sprinters. And say, bringing that fun competitive element to really get the true benefit of what you're looking to do. We'll share some of the content here of the resources. I know Niall is going to send them out. They're just some links and some names at the bottom for more. The names will be more, I suppose, attributed to the older groups. But there's some really good stuff there on the GA website. Thanks a million. Hopefully we've time for a couple of questions.
Yeah, it looks like we've 2 minutes there, Alan. So I'm a bit like Larry Gogan here now in just a minute quiz. So we're going to get going. So there's three questions in. So I think we should get through 2 of them. The first one is, what duration of speed drills would you do at under 10 and under 12?
What duration? So I suppose there might be 2 ways of answering it. From an overall time perspective, speed is probably incorporated nearly into everything you're doing. If you were to give it a specific component within a session, I generally keep to the fundamental skills that might be a 10, $10, $15, $20 meters maximum, and really focus on the short distances and the short durations to get the most from it. They don't need to be going anything above that at that age. The games you play, they will, again, they're turnaround like hairs. You'll get it in games at that age as well.
Yeah. The other first question: Do we advocate FERC-like approach with youth, or do you look towards adults?
I suppose there's definitely a place for whether it be fartlek training or tempo training across the ages. I know mass would also be quite a popular one for working on those higher speed distances. So at youth level, I think there's definitely a place for it. And like I say, it's not a full session. If you're given 5 to 10 minutes maximum within a session, maybe once a week, I think that's an allowable part of a session to really work on the fitness component of it that hopefully will carry through as you progress through the ages. So I definitely wouldn't be against that. And like I said, there's definitely, yep.
I'm just seeing there now, we
might run out of time here.
Cut off.
Are we still here?
Oh, we're still here, I think.
We're still here. Okay, we'll go on until we're cut off.
We'll keep going. So that's perfect. Next question in: hurl or not in speed agility work?
I'd put it in. Yeah, so it's going to be in your hand. I suppose the challenge is when the ball comes into play and the pass isn't right or the pass doesn't come, it's affecting what you're going to have in terms of that true output. But yeah, no, I'd have the hurl in play, and hurl can also be a really good tool for working on speed mechanics as well. I've seen it done quite a lot in terms of movement, whether it be hurl behind the head or in certain positions, looking for a lack of or anti-rotation. You'll see if that hurl is behind your head, resting on your shoulders, and you'll really see our players rotating a whole lot. You don't want them to be rotating a huge amount, and leaking loads of energy, you want them to try and maintain it. So that's a really good point there. I definitely have it in the drill, and like I say, I'd allow it to be brought into some of those mechanical movements as well, to get the most from it.
Perfect. No, thanks for that. Question in there from Niall. If you have access to indoor facilities, example indoor hall, would you recommend working on speed, agility early in the season, or is there greater risk of injury because of the impact of surface?
Yeah, I suppose a good question. Again, some surfaces are better than others too. And then you're coming down to quality of footwear. There's definitely, I suppose, I'd probably maybe put the focus more on those control movements we were speaking about. So the likes of that T drill I showed in the diagram, where you have that acceleration and the side movement when they know what's coming. It's a real opportunity to focus on, and again, because it's early in the season, it's a real opportunity to work on just movement efficiency that will then progress to the reactionary stuff, whether it be you're playing indoor games in the hall, etc., whatever they are, or certainly when it transfers out to the pitch. If you're allowing the opportunity to work on the mechanics of it and those controlled movements, I think there's no downfall to that. Like I said, the challenge comes with real hard surfaces, and whether it be slippy surfaces or whatever, or slippy footwear, yeah, there's always a risk. But no, I think control might be the way to go with that one.
Perfect. Next question in. How do you work with an under 14 group with a few girls not into running and very unfit?
I think probably going back to what we were talking about, trying to use the imagination and disguising it. And again, that every group is so different. So while I'm saying for quite a lot of this, the use of the ball might not get you the true benefits you're looking for. If that means bringing in the ball to your drill, whether they're running on to receiving a pass, or running on to giving a pass, maybe whether it's a shot after they run a 20-meter sprint, they're doing it unknown to them. So can you disguise it? And like I say, doing it with the ball is better than not doing it at all. So again, every group is so different, and what works for your group might not be able to work with another. So I definitely say work with what you have, but if it means disguising it in those different objects, or again, like I say, you might use I'd quite often use bibs hanging out of shorts, where if you pull a bib, it's for example, TIG or being chased, have a bib at the end of your shorts, and if they pull the bib, there's a winner on it. So again, you're just challenging them without they're even thinking about it. When you start talking about we're training speed, or there's no objects involved in it, then it probably becomes maybe boring for some, and you're not really getting a true effort. So yeah, disguise it with whatever equipment you can. Have the ball in it if it means do it rather than not do it.